the expanding. So thanks for that, Ikuto. I always forget to set the recording. And then we talk about the legacy and impact of your business. So thinking about what are your exit plans for your business and what are the succession plans for your business. Whilst this is quite a linear description of the process, the journey from founder to leader, we always say it's useful to think about that legacy part of your business at an early stage. So starting with the end in mind. And one of the reasons I'm very excited to have Kelly here is because I've known Kelly for many years and I've seen her travel this journey, firstly at the early stages of her first business, which has the great name Rubber Cheese, and was a sort of branding design company. And I'll ask Kelly to tell us a bit more about Rubber Cheese, to the point where she exited that business and is now doing something completely different. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And Kelly and I, we will just have a bit of a chat about that journey that you've had. So maybe, you can share a bit more about the start and tell us about Rubber Cheese and how long you were growing that business and what that journey was like before we got to that point where you exited it.
Yes. So Rubber Cheese had a very ridiculous name, as you can hear. Elaine, I founded that business, co-founded it in 2003, which was a blooming long time ago. So we've probably known each other since around about then, because I think we probably met on Academy, which was about 2003, 2004, I think. We've known each other over 20 years, which is incredible. So thank you so much for inviting me to come on and chat with you today. It's so lovely to be back in contact again. I was a graphic designer, and that was what I saw my career path being. And I worked in various different organizations, and I just got to the point where I kind of was in places where I wasn't really going anywhere. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And a friend of mine was in the same position, and we decided that we were going to set up an agency together. We were both designers, so clearly we thought we had all of the skill set to run a company, which we did not. And so 2003 became the start of Rubber Cheese, the start of our journey. And initially it was just myself and my co-founder, Paul. We took on anything and everything that we could design-wise. So we worked on marketing projects, branding projects. We started to do a little bit of web design and all that kind of thing, but it was still relatively early for kind of web and e-commerce and things like that at that point. And then over the years, we probably did that for about 2 or 3 years ourselves, and then kind of said, well, what are we actually building here? Or, are we building an agency? Is it just going to be the two of us forever? And we set out to build what turned into a really specialist niche agency. So at that point, about 2 or 3 years in, I made the decision to take a step back from design to actually lead the agency. And that meant learning a whole new set of skills. So what was interesting, Elaine, is when you said about that linear journey, I was thinking, well, yeah, like it's not linear even for the founder, because there's so many different, ups and downs that you go through. And that was the first point where I felt really challenged by what I was doing, because suddenly I was moving from somebody that was all about the design and the aesthetics and the problem solving on that sense, to somebody that needed to understand about forecasting and finance and sales and marketing, and how I got work for the agency, how I recruited people, what that looked like. So can
I just ask you there, because that's really interesting, that transition point, because we talk about this and we have on previous programs, and I talk about it on my accelerator program, because as you describe, you've been developing that business, you've been doing the design and everything yourself. That's your baby. And then you need to take that step back and become the kind of the manager as well as the leader of the business. And they're two very different sort of areas of skills, as well as emotionally what it feels like to let go of that kind of design work,
Yeah.
that you were very skilled at doing. So yeah,
It
how
was
was that?
tough, really tough. I actually felt really resentful. So I had a co-founder. So
Mm,
Paul stayed in the kind of creative director role, whereas I shifted into the managing director role, and we hired a designer that took over my design role. And I felt very resentful for a long time, actually. It probably took a good year and a half for me to be comfortable with that shift in role, because it was really difficult. I was having to learn lots of new skills. And at the time, it just felt completely and utterly overwhelming. And I used to joke and say that he'd got the fun bit because he just got to sit in the studio and do all the design work. And I had to go out and do all the hard bit. But I'll tell you now, the tables turned, because I ended up absolutely loving the new skills that I learned. And I did realize that my strength was around kind of the relationship side of things. So for me, networking and relationship building and things like, we didn't talk about it in the way that we talk about it now, but things like personal branding and public speaking and all of those kind of things that go hand in hand with your role as a founder, that I thrived at. And if I'd never taken that step, I would never have known that those things were kind of out there and things that I would have enjoyed doing. So the resentment did die down, but it was a tough call. And we hired people that were better than me. I think that was really key. I was a good designer. I wasn't a great designer. And we hired people that were really great designers. So, it was the right move for myself, and it was the right move for the agency and for our clients as well. And being able to then bring on those team members and see them kind of thrive and develop within the agency as well was incredibly kind of heartwarming and really satisfying for me. And we did that numerous times. So I think at one point there were 10 of us. We never grew to a huge size, but we always stayed very specialist and very niche in what we did. And that was where I guess we were comfortable. We didn't have aspirations to have kind of 30, 40, 50 people, but we wanted to still be big enough that we could service, the clientele that we had. And we were incredibly lucky. If you think about, we were a small agency based in Hertfordshire. We worked with global brands like Pernod Ricard and Chivas Brothers, and we worked with kind of national attraction brands up and down the country. So we did incredibly well for the kind of size of agency that we actually were. And I think, a lot of that was about bringing on the right people and finding the right skill set and actually being really niche about who we were targeting. And that's something that came a lot later down the journey. So we always kind of had a specialism in working with business to consumer brands. So we worked a lot in hospitality, in food and drink. We worked quite a lot with FMCG brands. Some of those brands we were never able to talk about because we were working white label for other agencies. But that was the kind of experience that we had. And one of those projects actually led us into the visitor attraction space. So we worked with, I said we worked with Pernod Ricard. One of their brands is the Plymouth Gin Distillery. And they have which is a visitor centre. So it's open if you want to go and do a tour of the distillery to see how the gin's made. We worked on a project for them, which worked brilliantly. They then rolled it out for another one of their distilleries, the Beefeater Gin Distillery, and then 4 of the whiskey distilleries up in Scotland. And that gave us such an insight into that kind of visitor experience, visitor economy. And we knew it was something that we wanted to kind of focus our attention on. And so we started to look for other projects that we could win within that space. And one that was quite monumental for us was winning a project with Eureka, the National Children's Museum, to redesign their website. Now, if you've never been, it is one of my most favourite places in the whole world. Winning that project and working with that team was just such a transformational moment for the agency, because we won it. We were one of 40 agencies that pitched for that project, which is crazy. I mean, that is crazy. Got down to the last 5 and then won it from that. And, I cannot even tell you what that did for the confidence of the agency. It was phenomenal. But it led us into being a niche agency for that sector. So from around 2016 through to when I sold the agency in August 2022, we became the leading web design agency for visitor attractions, and we focused solely on that niche. So it made everything so much simpler in terms of sales and marketing and the messages that we were putting out, because we were talking to one sector with one message. And so we were able to develop a really kind of core offering for that sector because we knew it inside out. We also released a podcast. You know, I used to host a podcast that was an element of kind of community building within that sector as well. So when the pandemic happened, the podcast was a really great way of getting people on and talking about what was happening in that sector. So it was almost like it was like day-to-day reporting on what was actually happening and how attractions were kind of facing up to the challenges that they were going through.
Yeah. And that sector was hit really hard, wasn't it? The visitor
Really?
attraction. Well, all the hospitality, but particularly if you
Yeah.
can't get visitors in,
I mean, everything, the whole industry shut down, which, you know, for all hospitality industries, it was absolutely the same. But you had challenges where, you know, some visitor attractions are zoos, for example. So you can't just stop. You've still got animals to care for. You've still got money that you need to raise. You've still got feed that you need to buy, you know, and it was a really, really horrendous time for them. And during that, as an agency, we just did as much as we could to kind of support them. So, you know, free things that we were putting out, ebooks, anything that we could do to get them ready for reopening. And it was it was an awful time, but there was so much kind of camaraderie at that point as well, and we really felt like we were kind of at the heart of that sector. But yeah, fast forward on to August 2022, and I think my co-founder and I, it had been nearly 20 years working together at that point and building and growing this agency. And agency life is very, very demanding on your time. You know, I couldn't even tell you the amount of my social time that has been swallowed up with my business at some point or another. And the same for my co-founder. I think we just ran out of steam, really. I think the two of us wanted to go in different directions. And so the natural thing was to sell the agency. We didn't want it to end. We had developed a lot of kind of IP. We'd got great clients contracted, and we'd got a brilliant team. So shutting it down didn't really seem like an option. And so we kind of looked around for opportunities to merge it or sell it to another agency. And that's essentially what happened. So we found a great agency that we merged the two together. We retained the two individual agency brands, but we kind of merged the team in the background.
How long did it take you to find the right buyer, really?
Not that long, actually. From the point of kind of talking about it with my co-founder and deciding that this is the route that we were going to go down. At one point, actually, Paul was going to buy me out, and I was going to go off and do something different. And then we just had a discussion about it, and this just didn't happen. So yeah, it didn't take that long. I think one of the things that I'd always been really conscious of doing is keeping a really good network of other agency owners. So you need people that are going through the same challenges as you. And it just so happened that I had a conversation with a founder during the pandemic about a few things, and mentioned to him that this is what we were thinking about doing. And then a couple of weeks later, he got in touch and he said, I think maybe there's an opportunity here. He was really interested in the niche that we'd got. Although his own agency didn't work in that space, he had a very personal interest in it. And so that's kind of how it happened. It was very easy in that sense. I wouldn't say that the sale process was particularly easy, and the purchaser, who's also called Paul, so it gets very confusing, he would definitely agree with me. It was a very tense time for all. There's a lot of due diligence that you go through. There's an awful lot of paperwork. There's an awful lot of things that you have to find, and it was almost like having two full-time jobs at once, which was relatively stressful. And I also had a 3-month-old at that point, so there was a lot going on that I was juggling. But the sale.
How long did that process take in terms of?
Good question.
Finding to.
Good question. I think it took about 14 or 15 months in total from initial conversation of we should talk about this to actually the sale. I think it took about 15 months, which I don't think is terrible. in the grand scheme of things. There was a lot going on at the
No.
time. We were still it was still tail end of the pandemic. There was a lot of things that were complex to do, that we were doing virtually. Anything and everything could get in the way, you know, holiday, God knows what got in the way of what was happening, or took your attention away from it. And, you know, you're trying to run a business and keep that afloat as well. So you've only got so much time that you can dedicate to it. So, yeah, I think it was about 15 months. It eventually happened in August 2022. My co-founder left that day and went off and set up his own thing. And I stayed on to do an earn out for a year. And then I stayed on for another 6 months after that. But those last 6 months, I would started to get itchy feet a little bit. I think it's really interesting process to go through selling your agency and then still work for it. For my agency, a lot of my founder role was going out and marketing the company. So I was the face of the agency, so to speak. So I would do a lot of public speaking. I'd go to lots of conferences. I would network. I would sell. And essentially, I still did all of those things once the agency was sold. So I went into the role that was head of commercial. And really, my sole purpose was to generate new business for the agency. So it was really doing the same thing. And I thought, well, this is brilliant, right? This is a role that I know inside and out. I can do this really blooming well. I can just focus solely on that while my daughter is really young, and I don't have to worry about learning new skill sets or going into a new place and trying to kind of, you know, all of that new stuff. Like, feels really daunting when you've got, you know, a lot going on in your personal life as well. And I did love it, and I did still enjoy it. But what I realized is I also liked being involved in all of the things and not just the one thing of the agency. And it was far too difficult to have this one thing that you were, you know, in charge of, but not being able to go, oh, but this thing over here probably needs some attention. And somebody's asked me about this. Can I help with this? Or the lack
somebody
of control.
else's decision at the end of the day, isn't it? Not yours any longer.
Ultimately,
yeah.
I could influence, but I couldn't decide anymore. And that was really, really difficult. I think it was probably difficult in the sense that for clients as well, where they would come and still be used to talking to me about stuff, but then I wouldn't be the decision maker anymore. And so it was really tough. The agency is doing brilliantly. I have left it in really great hands, and I'm so thrilled that they are continuing to do all of the good work that Paul and I built up over those years. So it was the right time to go for me. But there was a lot of angst about it. You know, there was angst about selling it in the first place, but then there was angst about not being Kelly at Rubber Cheese anymore, because I'd been that person for 20 odd years. And so the day that I left and handed over my email address was really sad. And there was a lot of tears that day.
Your identity, who you are, as you say, Kelly at Rubber Cheese, is changed now, and you're letting that go. It's a tough one.
It was really difficult.
And how soon after that did you start your new venture?
A week.
You didn't take a break.
No, it wasn't intentional, I have to say. So it took me a while to kind of work out what I was going to do. So I think about 6 months before I actually handed my notice in, I sat down with my husband actually, and I was like, what the F am I going to do? You know, what will I be now? Because I think one of the things that you don't realize when you become a leader is that you actually let go of a lot of the skills that you had that made you start the thing that you started in the first place. So I stopped being a designer to lead the agency. And so I'd not kept up that skill set. And so I said, well, I can't go back to being a designer. I'm not a designer anymore. It's been far too long. So what do I do? You know, what do I do? Do I go and do new business development for another agency? Don't really want to work for anyone. You know, having done that, I'm finding that really difficult. 20 years of self-employment will do that to a person. So where do I fit? Like, what do I do? Am I going to have to completely retrain? You know, maybe I'll go and do something completely different. I don't know. I did think about retraining as an interior designer. I do really love that as a passion, and I have had some experience of doing that on some property projects that we've worked on. So that was kind of in my mind, like, do I do that? And I did even sign up for a course. But then I was really fortunate in that a couple of agency owners that I know who are, they have brilliant agencies already, you know, like 2 or 3 years in, kind of said, you know what, if you're thinking about leaving, we could really do with someone like you to come and help us while we're going through this growth stage or while we're doing these things. And we want someone that's done what we've done before to kind of be by our side. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. I hadn't really considered that all of the skills that I've been building as a leader actually are really useful to other people going through that process. And long story short, that's ended up what I'm doing. So I left Rubber Cheese just before Easter. It was on the Thursday before Easter. I had Easter weekend with my family. And then I started work with my 2 new clients on the Tuesday and Wednesday of that week, which was crazy. I wouldn't advise doing that, but we had got a family holiday booked, so there was method in my madness of getting something started so that I could kind of start to understand where their agencies were at and what they would need from me before I went on holiday, and then could come back and hit the ground running. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now. I'm an agency advisor. So I really love working with those agencies that are kind of second year in, they're kind of figuring out like what their specialisms are. They want to niche down into sector. They're not quite sure how to do it or whether they should do it. And so they're the ones that I'm really enjoying working with. You know, it's what I know. It's those real kind of boutique agencies that are super, super niche, super specialist, and will end up being super profitable because of it.
Right. So you've seen certainly sort of, whether it's long term, but the next few years as being you as a solopreneur, as an advisor, as a consultant, focusing and sharing your knowledge. You don't see yourself building a new team or developing the business in that way.
No, not necessarily. If I'm honest, I don't really know, Elaine. So I think that I'm still in the R&D stage for this business. So I'm still figuring out elements of like what I do best, what I do want to do, what I don't want to do. And it's been 6 months now. So I'm literally 6 months in.
Stages, yeah.
So it's still quite new. And I think what's really nice is that I've had a lot of flexibility to do some things that I might have not said yes to previously, but I got the time to. And I've really enjoyed those. So I might do some more of those. I'm starting to think about working outside of the agency space as well. You know, it's what I know, it's the network that I have. But I think there is so much that I would love to do in terms of, you know, empowering women in business. You know, what does that look like? So I'm starting to look at whether I add like a coaching skill to the skills that I already have. So it's really nice to be able to kind of take this time and figure it out. Maybe I'll have a team one day. I don't know, but I won't be growing an agency again. I'll definitely stick to helping other people grow in theirs.
You've given, I mean, there's lots of nuggets in what you've said today. And I know there's lots of things that we can pull out from that, but it just related to what we were just talking about, that question. I mean, when you talked about Rubber Cheese, and it took you a while to really find the niche area that you were going to work in, you know, that one offering. And it may well be the same thing, the same process happens for you now. As you say, it is an organic process, isn't it? Finding out where our particular emphasis is or what we like to do, and you know, skill sets as they do develop. So it may well be for you for the next 6 months is around shaping the business and shaping it, or offerings are.
Yeah, exactly. And
journey.
exactly. And I think that's
opening things up for questions. Sorry.
That's all right. I was just going to say, you need to give yourself that time to do that as well when you're starting out. You know, what I would say, it doesn't have to be perfect when you start. You just need to start. So giving yourself the time to figure those things out as you go along is great. You'll find clients that will pay you while you're doing that as well. So, you know, you don't have to just wait until you've got everything that's perfect in your eyes before you get going.
Great, great. So we'll open things up for questions now. And Salwa has asked us questions about the main challenges you faced, and what advice would you give us in respect to those challenges?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say there's been many challenges over the years, and they've come in all shapes and sizes. So we've had challenges of recessions, we've had challenges of global pandemics, and having to suddenly learn how to run a business in a completely different way. We were fortunate, that actually we'd had a team member that had moved back up north about a year before the pandemic. So we were relatively kind of set up to work remotely, but still having to lead a team where you can't all get together in one room, and you're used to thrashing kind of ideas out and brainstorming together like that was quite difficult. And I think suddenly the impact of everything being video calls and stuff was quite mentally draining as well. So that was definitely a huge challenge. But I think that my real biggest challenge was trying to lead and grow the agency whilst going through infertility, IVF treatment, and baby loss. So it's something still that's not talked about openly enough. But at the time, I knew lots of people that had suffered miscarriages and were going through the IVF process. I didn't know that many of them that ran businesses at the same time. And so I had what I felt like this added pressure of having to show up, and I know, and ultimately, people do for their employees as well. So, this is it's an equally big challenge if you are employed by somebody. But, there were times where I had to go to pitches having just been delivered like the most horrendous news, or, I'd have to go, another failed round of IVF will have happened, and 2 days later I've got to be on a stage delivering a talk to 200 people. Like that's tough. That's mentally tough, like how you pick yourself up and try and do those things. But when it's your business, you don't have a choice. There's nobody else that's going to step in and do that things for you. So that's definitely been the biggest challenge in my whole career, is trying to do those things while struggling, trying to start a family.
And thank you for sharing that. I mean, I know over the years you have been quite open about what's been going on, and as you say, it's not talked about enough, those challenges that we face. So yeah, thank you for doing that. And you have a wonderful little 3-year-old.
I do, yeah. One last roll of the IVF dice did give us our little girl Edie, who was 3 in July. So yeah, we have been through some really horrendous things, but we're incredibly lucky and so privileged to actually have her. So yeah, it did have a happy ending in the end.
Yeah, that's great. Any other questions coming in for Kelly today? Well, as I said, Kelly, I think there's so much in what you shared about that founder to leader journey, and we talk about this sort of it's not a linear route, but I think you've touched on sort of the key points that I always mark out as the challenges of moving from the one who does all of the operational, does everything yourself, to having to step back and let others take on that role. And that's an emotional as well as a practical challenge, because you need to have the systems and processes in place to grow your team, to manage those other people. That's about the operations and the systems, but it's also about the emotional challenge that you have as you grow your business. And then going into a completely new area, well, not completely new area, but a different role as well as the new business changes, and negotiating the new buyer and all of that. It's you've certainly given us a good overview of that founder to leader journey, so really thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
What we will be doing is we'll take the video and we'll share it with people who've registered who share it on there, and who do encourage people to participate on there and ask questions that we can with there also. And we're also summarizing the transcripts from the different talks that we've had, and we'll be putting those together in a PDF to send around to people who turn up. Those people who don't turn up won't get that. So that's an added bonus for you guys who actually turn up. Nikki,
Elaine, you have a question there? Just so you know. Sorry.
Yeah, I've got you. Yeah, I've got.
AA has a question.
It's.
And you're breaking up.
Elaine's breaking up. So I have mentored future agency owners in the past. Yeah. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free, and we can have a chat.
Have we lost her completely?
I don't know. It's all gone very quiet from Elaine.
It's definitely gone quiet from Elaine.
I don't know if she's still there.
As well.
Elaine's network is bad. She's trying to reboot and then come back.
Okay.
So yes. So if there's any question, we can just go ahead and ask Kelly, or we could leave the questions under the chat. I think she's back.
Is she back?
So AA has a question. I'm not sure if you've responded to her.
Yeah,
She asked if you have any future agency owner, if you mentor future agencies owner.
Yeah, so I have in the past. I'd be happy to have a chat and see if we're a good fit for each other. So I said, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, then feel free, and we can see if that's something that we can do.
Okay, Kelly, I think you can drop your LinkedIn.
Yeah, okay, I will do that.
Yeah.
Kelly, can you tell us more about how you were able to separate yourself emotionally from the agency that was your baby, and you saw it growing through the years? I mean, it's not easy, yeah?
No.
It wasn't easy for you, I'm sure, especially that you were not on the back in the back seat, but at least, as you said, you were not always able to give decisions. You might be suggesting, but now you have to move to a new role. Yeah, I can't imagine myself like working on a project at work and then someone else taking over. I started it, I built it, and it was becoming successful. And all of a sudden, I need to move to, though it's healthy. I'm sure it's healthy at a certain point, but it's not easy, yeah?
It really wasn't easy, and there was a lot of angst involved with the decision. And I think it was probably made slightly easier in that it wasn't solely my decision. So I did have a co-founder, and the two of us, you know, we talked it through together, and we knew that that was the right decision for both of us. I do think, you know, Paul and I have got a great relationship now, but I think, you know, there were times where things were quite flinty between us. It was really difficult. You know, we'd had 2019 had been a particularly challenging year for the agency. If you can remember back, you know, there was a lot of, you know, Brexit had happened, you know, budgets were cut all over the place. Nobody really knew what was going to happen. And so marketing is often the thing that gets cut the soonest, which is never the right thing to do. But, you know, there was a lot of angst that year. And then, so we had actually had to let a couple of people go at the end of 2019, which we'd never done before. So that had really had a huge effect on Paul and I. We'd never been in that position before. It was really horrible. That was probably the lowest point of my whole agency career. I'd let not underperforming and not great people go before, but having to let good people go was, it was heartbreaking. I can't even tell you how horrible that was. And then obviously, you know, we came back in the new year, you know, you had a couple of months in. I actually lost a baby in the February, and then we got whacked into lockdown in the March. So, you know, we were like, we'd been emotionally, you know, smashed in the face with a frying pan. And then suddenly we were like, right, okay, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic now. We've got this work. We know that we've got some contracts that would take us through, I think, to the October. We had no idea whether anyone was going to spend any money between March and October. Like, we were like, okay, well, the agency might run till October. We just don't know. And everybody was in that same position, you know, it wasn't just us. But we were really fortunate, you know, we won projects and stuff. But I think all of those things, they took a lot out of you. All of the things that I'd been through personally had taken a hell of a lot out of me. And when we were finally lucky enough to get to a point where we thought we were actually going to bring this child home, I think my mindset about the agency had changed by that point. I knew that I couldn't give the hours and give the time to it that I had in the past. I knew that I'd now got another project that needed my attention more than the agency of my first baby. So it was still hard, but there was a lot of things that were kind of in front of me that made it an easier decision at that point. The hardest bit was once that decision had been made and it was sold, the actual harder bit was then leaving at the end of it, because that was the final. You know, once I sold it, I was still going to work for them for a year. So although it wasn't going to be mine anymore, I wasn't going anywhere. Nothing really changed in the grand scheme of things. You know, my LinkedIn profile didn't change. You know, I was still doing the same things that I was doing. But in March this year, that was the harder bit, because suddenly that was it. I wasn't at Rubber Cheese anymore, and it was off out into the unknown on my own. So that was the scarier part. And funny enough, like the agency's in really good hands. I don't worry about that at all. You know, it's probably in better hands than it's ever been. But it was the podcast that I found really difficult. So the podcast had been mine. So I hosted it. I had built it. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And actually seeing, I can't watch it. It sounds really awful. Like, I do listen to it, but I can't watch the videos that they put out, because it really makes me sad that I'm not part of that anymore. So that has been the harder thing, because that was solely mine, and that's quite, that's a tough thing to still see.
We had another question pop in from AA, which is about the future with regard to AI and how that you see that affecting agencies.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Agencies are embracing it. I mean, we have to, and I think that's really key. I am not an AI specialist, so I'm just going to caveat anything that I talk about AI wise with that. But you know, I use it day to day, and most of the people probably do without even knowing it, to be honest. But I use it in an intentional way. I think the agencies that are embracing it now will do really well. If agencies don't embrace it in any way, shape, or form, even from a productivity perspective, then they are going to be really struggling in the next few years, I think. It's hard, though. What I would say is it's hard to embrace new technology when you've been in a sector for so long. And like me, I'm actually a bit of a technophobe. So there are young agency founders that are coming through now that are using AI to incredibly, great impact, and they will really go far with that. So yeah, I think it will change the agency space, but if you're embracing it now and you're riding with that wave, then that's the best thing that you can do.
Yeah, it's certainly getting smarter and smarter. I was on a call earlier today with somebody who's talking about how you write your own chat GPT bot, and giving it instructions to do all that. It's just incredible. But
blows my mind. I'd really like to do that, but it blows my mind. That's where I need the team, Elaine. That's where I need people. I need people that are far smarter with technology than I am. Nikki, thank you for your words. That's really kind of you to say.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, we've just wrapping up now. So I really want to thank Kelly. And it's been great for me to reconnect with Kelly. As she mentioned, we've known each other for over 20 years. And you know how you follow people maybe through LinkedIn or through Facebook and keep in touch. But I've always felt that connection's there. So, and you've given us a really wonderful, inspiring story, as Sal has said in the little message there, and we really appreciate your openness and your honesty and transparency and sharing the difficult times as well as the good times with the business. So next week our guest is Melissa, who will be joining us from the States. Melissa's a serial entrepreneur, done a lot in the creative industry, the creative sector, a lot with broadcasting companies. And when she and I were having a chat about what it is that we would focus on, and we just let it run anyway, as it did with Kelly, but she talks about audacity with women. And I really like that phrase about how can we be more audacious as women and female founders. So I'm really looking forward to Melissa. So I hope you can come back and join us there. If you haven't already booked a one-to-one with me, I'd be very happy to have a chat with you about your business and just talk about where you are with your business and where you see maybe the rest of the year going, and finding yourself in a good place for kicking off 2025. And it's good to see Gaynor here, because Gaynor's going to be one of our guests in a few weeks' time as well. So thanks once again, Kelly. Thank you all of you for joining us. Ikutu will be following up, and just keep an eye out on social media for more details about next week's speaker with Melissa. So thank you all, and I'm sorry about my IT issues. But I got back.
You did, yay.
Thanks again. Bye.